Hello, welcome to the live Q&A for Penn Engineering doctoral programs. My name is Christina Burton. I'm the Director of Ph.D. admissions. I hope today's session will assist you in finalizing your application for the December 15th deadline. Please note that today's webinar will be recorded. The video recording will later be posted on the Penn Engineering Graduate Admissions YouTube channel. Subscribe now to receive alerts. We have a short agenda for today's session. We'll start with opening remarks from the Associate Dean of Graduate Programs. We'll also leave plenty of time to answer your questions. The session will conclude with a review of admissions requirements, timeline, and best practices. Now I'll hand it over to Dr. Liu to offer opening remarks.
Hi, welcome everyone. Thank you, Christina, for kicking this off. It's so wonderful to see all of you. I see that there are 140 of you on the call and growing. So it's amazing to see all your interest in our PhD program at Penn Engineering. So I'll start off by kind of reminding everyone that our deadline is December 15 for PhD applications. Earlier, there was an email sent out in error about the deadline being December 1st, and greatly apologize for any confusion this may have resulted. We want to emphasize that all your applications mean a lot to us, and we want to see you apply here. Now, today's webinar is kind of interesting. We don't actually have any slides prepared. In fact, we just had a recent virtual event where we presented slides, and it's all going to be posted or has already been posted on YouTube on our Penn Engineering Graduate Admissions YouTube channel, which we'll drop a link here in a while. But rather today, I really want to open the floor to any one of you who have questions. I see some questions already coming in. The floor is yours, right? You could ask questions on the PhD admissions process, what its life is like as a PhD student. And just keep in mind, no question is a bad question. So if you're asking a question, very likely many other applicants will have similar questions. So in fact, you're doing everybody a great service by putting your questions out, and we'll try our best to answer. So the grad admissions team will focus more on PhD process related questions, and I will focus more on academic questions. So without further ado, let us get started. Let me try to read off questions as they come in, and I will try to answer. And some of them, if we have too many questions, we probably going to start to switch to answering some of them live in chat, and I think Christina will be helping out on that. Cool. All right. So the first question I see on the chat, and I think this is quite a common question people will have, is what is the normal review process? Now, the thing to keep in mind is we have 6 departments, or rather 6 graduate groups, and every department does the review a little bit differently. In some departments, they admit students as a group into the whole department. In other cases, they will admit students by individual faculty. And so in the case for myself, I'm from computer science, and I work in the area of distributed systems. So usually what I'll do is I'll work with a couple of faculty in my area, and we look at how much funding, how much advising capacity we have. And then we will collectively decide which students to admit. We'll let our departments know, and then they'll admit once they hear from us. And oftentimes, it's not unusual for us to reach out to the applicants to schedule a Zoom call. So if you receive an email from a faculty who wants to chat with you, please feel free to jump on. And usually that's probably like the beginning of a review process, and it's probably good news that you've been shortlisted for an early interview. But there are also a lot of cases where faculty will admit students directly. Now, in terms of time frame, decisions can go out anytime in spring from January all the way to April 15. And usually different faculty may also have like a list of students they want to admit in the first round versus the second round and so on. So if you don't hear back from us, don't be anxious because decisions can go out at any time. And there's also no correlation between when you hear back from us and how we think about you, right? Some of my best students, the superstars, we admit them close towards the end of the season, right? And they turn out to be fantastic. So once you're here, you're our student. We'll do our best to help you. And exactly when you get admitted, don't read too much into it. So there is the next question on, let's see. How much consideration is given to GPA? So let me try to answer that. So first of all, we make decisions in a holistic manner. I think 2-3 years ago, one of the things we did was to remove GRE as a mandatory requirement. And what we try to do is to evaluate each applicant holistically. I've certainly seen students with not so high GPA get admitted and students with very high GPA that don't, right? So a lot of times when faculty look at admitting students, there is no litmus test. It's not like, oh, you are 3.5, I'm going to read your application. If you're less, I don't, right? So there's a lot of factors that come into play. Research interest, research fit. Sometimes we invite you for a Zoom webinar or Zoom meeting, and that's also to explore like whether it's personality fit, what kind of research we're working on at that moment. So it's a more holistic evaluation because ultimately it's going to be a very personal decision on whether to admit a student or not. Cool. So I'm going to go down the list for the next question, which is, let me just take that. So I've answered the review process. So in the professional resume section, I think Christina, feel free to chime in. I think you can put it in any format, but I would say since this is for PhD application, if you were to upload a CV, try to include things that are easy for us to evaluate. So what do I mean by that? Include, for example, if you have any publications or even papers under submission, make sure you have a publication section to include that. Usually that may not be something you include in a typical job application, but that's certainly something that will be helpful for us to look at. Things like which school you went to, your GPA, your like classes that you have taken, where there are some project highlights of interest to you. I think those are things that are good to look at. And again, the bottom line is what you want to do is to help us put together, make it easy for us to evaluate your application. That's really what it boils down to, right? So when we look through your profile, the CV, if you submit one, should help us quickly kind of evaluate whether to take you on to the next round. All right, so let's see. Next question well, this is a very long one. So I've reviewed the faculty profiles at the University of Pennsylvania, identified 2 professors in Greek. Should I into what would highlighting my interest in other faculty interests? So first of all, here's I think every faculty admits students a little bit differently. I have by now graduated 16 PhD students, and I'm advising 6 students right now. I have to say though, many of my students did not indicate me as their first choice, sometimes not even second choice. I know there's some professors who will filter based on that, but I also know many faculty, including myself, that use the columns that you indicate more as a guide for us to know what's your research interest. And many times I collaborate closely with other faculty, right? In my area, I work with folks like Vincent Liu, Sebastian Angel. Sometimes we look at students together, and then we'll say, hey, this is a great fit. Maybe this could also be a wonderful co-advising scenario, and then we'll talk to the student. So I would say use those columns to help indicate um, uh, more as a way of showing to us, signaling to us what your research interests are. And if there are multiple faculty that you think may advise you, maybe possible fit your interest, I would say include that in your statement of purpose, but also indicate that in the drop-down boxes. Because there is no downside to indicating more, because it shows your interest. And I also think this is important in today's context where research is becoming increasingly interdisciplinary. So for example, if you say you're interested in machine learning or artificial intelligence, that's a really broad area, right? You could apply AI in optimizing distributed systems. You could apply AI in material science, right? So simply saying broadly, my interest is in machine learning, um, may not help the committee understand your interest better, right? So I've seen cases where students indicate multiple areas, and that actually is helpful because it helps us understand what your interests are. But keeping in mind, we also recognize that people do change. Even for myself, right? I remember indicating a particular research area, but when I went to grad school, I switched areas. So in many ways, I think what we really look for is a strong motivation to do research and certain track record that suggests you'll be successful. All right. So there's another question. Um, is there an interview round? If so, when that would be? So let me take that question. So PhD admissions is a very, one would say, research area specific, of very faculty specific. And so I would say the interview round, if there is one, and I put a big if around that, it really could be any time after the deadline closes all the way till April. Sometimes faculty feel like, and it certainly has happened to me before, this student fits my research interest very well, way above the bar. There are cases where I would admit the student directly without an interview process. In other cases, the faculty may say, I feel more comfortable if I get a chance to talk to the student, in which case then they will email the student for an interview. And I would also add that there are other departments, for example, like um, uh, bioengineering, I believe, and I have to verify this, where there is a more formal process that goes through an interview process for selected student. But again, it varies from department to department. So I would say if you don't hear back from us, don't panic or anything. It's just that allow every department to go through their evaluation process. All right, so I'm going to skip past some of the more application process oriented questions. I would leave that to my staff here. They're better equipped than I do to handle. So I'm going to focus going down the list on questions that are more specific to academics. So there's a question to ask about the graduate school experience for international students. So let me try to answer that. Now, first and foremost, I'm an international student myself. I came from Singapore like more than 20 years ago to the US. And I would say among our faculty, we have a large number of faculty who used to be international students like myself. And so we have a vibrant international student community. At the university level, we have ISSS, which welcomes all students. They do all the visa processing and so on. But then at the school level, We have an Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. We have, for example, like an annual cultural event where we bring together students from different culture groups. There's lion dance, Indian music, name it. And so we really welcome all students from all over the world. And part of that is also the best research ideas come when you bring together people from different community, different ideas. And it also makes life much more interesting. So by now, I have had PhD students who are who are American born, who are from India, China, France, name it, right? So, and actually, even for me as an advisor, it's wonderful to have students from different parts of the world. Now, for international students from certain countries, and I really hope it doesn't happen to you. We had in the past maybe some, visa delays, things like that. Um, but we will always help students navigate through this. As a former international student myself, I know how stressful all of this could be, and we'll do everything we can to help you. And that also means by the time you come here to navigate things like CPT, OPT, getting yourself ready to hit the job market or doing internships along the way, we will try to help and support you as well. All right. So there's a next question about machine learning plus X program. What are the X specialization? So this one is an interesting question. It uh, actually started, I think, about a few years ago when we realized there were a lot of students who applied to the area of machine learning and artificial intelligence. And today, with the advancement in AI, I think it's even more the case. But what this has resulted in, and I think this is great advice for everybody here on this call, is the admissions pool became very lopsided, right? We have large number of applicants who indicate they are interested in machine learning AI, and then far fewer students in other research areas. Um, but what we've then realized is a lot of, if you look at the machine learning or AI applicant pool, you can further segment the areas, right? So there are some students who are interested in working on the theory or the mathematical foundation of machine learning. Then in that case, someone like Professor Eric Wong or Professor Serbi Go, they would be perfect advisors. There are some students who are more interested in like machine learning as applied to databases, right? So we have a new faculty, Professor Ryan Marcus, who's one of the leading experts in that, right? He uses reinforcement learning to optimize databases and so on. Now, if you look broadly across the engineering school, um, we have faculty working in PICS lab that uses computational techniques, many times machine learning, to solve problems in material science, in healthcare, and so on. So consequently, I think what you have seen, and I'm speaking from a CIS faculty, looking at the CIS application pool. Now we would like students to be more specific. So for example, if you want to work on machine learning as applied to programming languages, then there's an option for you to do that, or as applied to systems. So I myself, for example, have done a lot of work on using AI to optimize distributed systems. So if you make that clear in your application, then certainly that would get my attention and also other faculty doing more applied machine learning work. But that's a really great question. I think as a matter of strategy, please be as specific as you can. All right, so the next question is how to make application materials more pervasive to improve the possibility of getting admitted. Wow, this is a really big question, Chen Yang. So I'll try to answer as best as I can. Now, on one hand, you want to be as specific as you can as far as your motivation to come to grad school and the type of research you want to work on. Keep in mind, faculty have been grad students before, and we have seen a lot of students. So for many of us, including myself, I view what the student write in the statement of purpose as more as a thought process to understand their motivation to do PhD studies. recognizing that when people come, they may have some change of interest over time, right? So I myself, some of my students came in to work on formal methods, and then they decided they wanted to apply formal methods to distributed systems, and then they switch over to work in my research area. So I would say that to maximize your chances, it's not so much trying to micro optimize the strategy on what areas to put in. Is this person more likely to take me in or that? But rather to make your application stand out by emphasizing some of your strengths, your achievements, and also your motivation to do PhD studies. The why is very, very important. I often tell my students, and this is not a quote that I invented, I heard it from another senior faculty. If somebody is not strong in math, you can teach that person. If somebody is not good with writing English, written English, you can coach. But the motivation, the fire in the belly, the desire to do a PhD, the kind of person who after 3 paper rejections will still come back the next day and keep grinding it away, the grit and the perseverance, that is like much harder to teach, right? So at least for me, when I meet students, I try to look at their statement to understand the why. Like why do they want to do a PhD? What are their long-term career aspiration? What have they done up to that point to help them towards that goal, right? I think doing that would be much better. And the other thing I would advise students to do is if you plan to email certain faculty to get their attention, please, please, please do not send like template emails. I've received emails which are like clearly like they sent to 10, 15 other faculty, and they just change the name and the research area, right? Sometimes they even bold my name. So I know that's part of a template. If an applicant clearly spends like 10 seconds drafting an email to the faculty, the chances of reply is not that high. So if you really want to maximize your chances, then please send more thoughtful emails to the faculty you're interested to work with, right? Spend some time reading their papers, maybe one or two, to understand what they're working on and why you are interested in their research. Now, clearly, it's finals time. Many of you have other things to do. So you couldn't do that to 100 faculty, but pick a few, right? 2 or 3 people that you really, really want to work with and send thoughtful messages. 2 or 3 thoughtful messages, emails, is better than 300 pray and spray templated messages, right? I think that's a very important advice that I hope you will take. Um, so there is a question about working in production engineering, and now you're interested in fluid mechanics. Will my application be considered positively? Okay, so major caveat. I work in computer science. I have a secondary appointment in electrical and systems engineering. So this is not, and I am nowhere an expert in this. I have to say though, we do have faculty working on fluid mechanics. We do have faculty working on advanced manufacturing. So I would suggest going through the faculty website to take a look. But also keep in mind that our departmental boundaries are very loose. In fact, for PhD, we tend to use the word graduate group more than department. So if you go on, for example, the MEM, Mechanical Engineering Department, you can see a list of all the primary and the secondary faculty members. And many times, departmental silos these boundaries were decided decades ago. But technology has advanced significantly. So the boundary between departments is somewhat blurred as a result. So that's why it's not unusual for faculty, even myself, to have appointments in multiple departments. So I would say check out the faculty website, look at some of their publications, and if you think they fall in your area of interest, then definitely try to do what I said like 5 minutes ago, which is read out 1 or 2 of their publications, send them a thoughtful message, and then go from there. So Dongxin Yan asked a question about lab rotation. How many labs can I rotate? All right, so the question is, it depends. And let me explain why. In the engineering school, you can broadly divide the engineering school into what we call wet lab departments and the dry side of the house, right? So this is a kind of a coarse granularity. So what do I mean by that? So if you work in medical related area, then that's more on the wet side. And if you work more um, let's say computer science or electrical circuits, then that's more on the dry side. Now, different departments do things a little bit differently. So for example, in chemical and biomolecular engineering, they tend to admit students as a department or graduate group. And then when they come, based on the student interest, they then decide which faculty is best suited to work with them. And even then, it's not like a cast in stone, right? So if in year 2 or year 3, if you decide, hey, maybe this lab is not a good fit for me, there's somebody else who's a better fit. Sometimes students get co-advisors, sometimes they switch labs. These things do happen. Now, if you go, for example, to bioengineering, we have students who are directly admitted into a particular PI's lab. It's not unusual in the wet labs. You have labs that are named after a faculty, right? So my name is Boon Tao Lu. So if I work in a medical lab, so maybe there'll be a Lu lab. Not the world's best name, a Lu lab, but it's not unusual, right? So in that case, you'll be working under Professor Lu in the lab, and oftentimes in the early stages in bioengineering. And I would encourage you to reach out to the bioengineering graduate group chair, Yale Cohen, or one of the coordinators to understand this better. They do have students who are directly admitted to a lab, but they also have students who do lab rotation, where they work for a few weeks and then they try out another faculty's lab for a few weeks. Now, on the dry side of the house, right, in areas like closer to mine, so I'm the lab director of the distributed systems lab. And in my lab, I wouldn't say my lab, I would say our lab. There are many faculty, right? There's Vincent Lius, Sebastian Angel, Ryan Marcus, Zach Ives, Insub Lee, right? You can go on dsl.cis.upenn.edu. The whole list is there. But the main point to note is when you're admitted, you're not really admitted to a single faculty, but rather to a group of faculty. Students may start off working with one of us. You will attend our regular DSL seminar where you'll be exposed to many other faculty. You'll be in the DSL lab, open office environment where you mix around, mingle with other students, working with other faculty. And then you, over time, decide who is the best fit for you. I would say such a model is also used in the GRAPS lab, which is our robotics lab, which brings together faculty from electrical, computer science, and mechanical. So again, varies from group to group. But I would say at Penn, we do have a certain amount of flexibility, especially in the first year. And part of the reason is that majority of the first year students are school funded and not PI funded, which means really there is flexibility for you to figure out who's the best fit, and then you can decide later on who you want to be your more permanent advisor. All right, next question. I'm a mechanical engineering question. And by the way, I noticed the questions piling up, so it's very unlikely I can get to everything by 1 p.m., but I'll do the best that I can. And I hope in answering some of these questions, it may also answer some of the later questions. And if I don't, I apologize in advance. But these are all great questions, so I do want to take my time to answer everyone. So I'm a mechanical engineering student. I do research in computer science. My interests are faculty from CS department. Which department should I apply for? All right, so the first thing to note is many faculty have joint appointments. So let's take our Dean Kumar, for example. His primary home is in mechanical engineering, but he has an appointment in computer science. And he certainly has taken on students from computer science. One of our new exciting young faculty, Nadia, she works in robotics. Her primary home is in mechanical, but she also admits students from electrical and she has an appointment in computer science. Likewise, I have an appointment in electrical. So I would say when you decide what department to apply to, um, focus more on the faculty, less so on the specific department, right? Choose the faculty that are best aligned with your research interests, knowing that the boundaries is somewhat loose because many of us have joint appointments. There's one practical consideration you need to have though, which is the course requirement, right? Let's say you're a mechanical engineer, and you decide you want to apply to computer science. Now, keep in mind, as a computer science student, you have to fulfill certain course requirement. Uh, Actually, thankfully, the computer science course requirement is very flexible today. So you could customize a course requirement that is very specific to your interest. But just keep that in mind. So when you decide, in addition to faculty, also look at the per department requirement, because maybe in some department, the requirements would be easier for you given your mechanical engineering background. But I would say there are plenty of mechanical engineering students that work on computational topics. So you will certainly find, possibilities there. Um, All right, so there is a question about student anxious not getting an interview call. So don't worry too much about the interview call, right? So again, like as I mentioned earlier, there are faculty who directly admit, there are faculty who choose to call up a student. It really varies from faculty to faculty. So don't read too much. Don't be sitting there in front of your computer, checking your email every 5 minutes, waiting for that call to come, right? So just apply to as many schools as you can, do the best that you can, and let the process play out. And I'm sure all of you on this call, hopefully lucky enough, we are fortunate enough to have you come to Penn, but I'm sure you will all end up in a great place. So is the CIS program and ECE program committee based? So we really do admissions in a much more decentralized fashion. There are some departments, they may have selection committees. I think BE does that, and possibly CBE as well. But in many other departments, it's individual faculty that admit students. And so there really isn't a committee, so as to speak. But I would say you as the applicant should not have to worry about this, whether the school admit by faculty, admit by research group, or admit as a department. Just put forward your best application and don't worry too much about that. Um, so there is a question on, are there initiatives, resources provided to help students transition into their desired career paths? So this is a wonderful question. I remember on the first day of grad school when I went to the, and by the way, my grad school cohort had a record size because I came back right after the dot-com crash in 2001. A lot of people came back to grad school then. So, but I remember very clearly on the first day of class, the faculty who was standing there, he asked, how many of you would like to go to industry? The people that put up their hands. And then there were, how many of you would like to go to the academia? Then there were students that put up their hands too. And interestingly, I noticed 5 years later, a lot of students change. I was the one who put up my hand for industry, and here I am now as a faculty member talking to you, right? And I clearly remember falling in love with teaching after I became a teaching assistant in my second year. And at that time, we really kind of started off, hey, maybe I should consider a career in academia. So what resources do we provide? Many. So at the university level, we have career services that help you to refine your resume and so on. But at the school level, we also do a lot of programming led by Emily Perry, who is the Associate Director for Professional Development. For example, we have a seminar on how to put together your job application if you're going to hit the academic job market. So what I'll do is I will invite a few recent faculty hires. For example, I remember vividly Professor Nadia was one of the folks that I invited. And she would come and tell students, hey, when I was applying for a faculty position, here was my thought process. Here are some of the materials I put together and so on. We have also done one for teaching track because I do recognize that some students, when they graduate, they may decide, hey, my passion is in teaching more than research. So what are some of the opportunities out there for teaching focus position in the academia? So for that, last year we got together a few of our teaching faculty. I remember folks like Dr. Swapnil, Dr. Arvin, and they talk about such things, what it's like to be a teaching faculty. We have even invited entrepreneurs, right? If any one of you interested to start a company next time based out of your research, we invited some alums who are successful entrepreneurs or in the midst of, doing their own companies. They came back, talk to students about some of their experiences. So hopefully, by providing all these opportunities, it will help you think through, because I think it's not just the mechanics of applying, but also the thought process to decide what's the best career path for you. All right, so can you differentiate between material science engineering and chemical engineering program? Oh, so major caveat, I don't work in either of these areas. So whatever I tell you now may not be the technically most correct answer. One observation that I can tell you though, if you go to our faculty website, you find that many faculty have appointments that span different um, different graduate groups. Uh, it's not unusual for faculty to have an appointment in both material science and chemical engineering. For example, I believe Professor Karen Winey fits exactly that profile. And why is that so? I think it's because engineering is becoming increasingly interdisciplinary. So let's take quantum computing for a minute, right? So you can do quantum at the computer science level, right? Working with Professor Gyu-Shu Lee, for example. You can do quantum at the physical level, like Professor uh, um, uh, Bassett, for example, in ESC department. You can do a quantum at the materials level. You can work on a fabrication technology for semiconductors, and that could take on a very material science field. It can also take on a very electrical, right? If you're thinking about circuit design and so on. So consequently, you should view the boundaries to be relatively loose. So when you look at the faculty, don't focus too much on department, but rather more on their research interests and how that meets some of your career goals. But with the caveat, going back to what I mentioned earlier, also take a look at the course requirement, because it may be some cases where based on your undergraduate training, you might have an easier time getting through some of the first, second year course requirements. All right, so the next question is on a doctoral in artificial intelligence. Not invited opinion. So I think I've answered this question on interview already, so I'm going to skip that. So you can watch the earlier parts. The UK grade distinction converted to GPA. Wow, this one I'm not very sure. So I might need to leave this to the admissions team to answer that. But I believe in the US, we probably will convert something similar to the US, which is A is a 4.0, B is a 3, and so on. So admissions process, which sections are weighted the heaviest? We evaluate every applicant holistically. And then when I say it, I really mean it. And there are many, many factors that we look at. And I can only tell you what I do, knowing that every faculty does it a little bit differently. So the things that I look out for include reading their statement to understand why they would like to do a PhD. What are some of their motivations behind it? I look at evidence in their track record that suggests they are walking the talk, right? So what do I mean by that? That means they have actually, for example, done some undergraduate research or did something that provides strong signal on their motivation to do grad school. Now, I also sometimes in certain fields, publications have very quick turnaround. And sometimes in other fields, it takes a lot longer. So there is no litmus test that says you need X number of publication before you could get admitted, because every field is different. The time it takes to get a paper out in distributed systems is not the same as the time it takes to get a machine learning paper out, right? These are different areas, so we do calibrate for that. It is important also to get strong letters of recommendation. Sometimes if a letter comes from somebody that I know very well, I have strong professional ties with, that person sometimes even shoot me an email and say, hey, Boone, you got to check out this really strong student, then that means a lot to me. But I also recognize not all of you have the luxury of coming from a university where the faculty are well known to a lot of people, well connected. So don't let that discourage you. It is, however, important if you have done research or you have TA'd for a faculty to get a strong letter, right? A letter that says, so-and-so got an A grade in my class. It's a really difficult class. That letter is wonderful, but it's not going to be as good as a letter that says that so-and-so took my class, did well, sat in front of class, come to office hours all the time, ask me wonderful questions, shows a lot of energy. Or a letter that says, this person worked on my research project. We haven't yet had a publication, but things are looking really promising. This student has strong research motivation and instincts. Or a letter that says, this student applicant was a teaching assistant, did a wonderful job, very responsible, great team player, very reliable. All of this will help you stand out. So Justin asked a question. What are some characteristics of a Penn students that may differ from other schools? Wow, this is a really, really deep question. And I don't think I can do justice to this, Justin, in the amount of time that I have. But I would say, based on the students that we have admitted, Penn students tend to have broad interests. They are interdisciplinary. And I think that also speaks to the strength of our school. We are an engineering school. However, we have strong ties across campus. There are many med school professors that also advise students in engineering. We make it easy for them to do it. We have faculty over at Wharton Statistics. We have joint appointments, faculty who have appointments in economics and computer science, faculty who have appointments in neuroscience, med school, computer science. We also even have a faculty with an appointment at Wharton, Annenberg, and computer science. So I would say our students tend to be interdisciplinary, curious, and certainly in my research group, I also like to think, the students we have made are good team players. They are there to help other students. They are there to advance their own research, but also be aware of what's going on in the rest of the group. We encourage people to attend seminars to learn about what people are working on, and so like to kind of have intellectual curiosity. All right, so I'm going to skip some of the interview questions that I've already answered. So let me take the research and work-life balance one. So one of the things that I've done as Associate Dean was to lay out some guidelines on recess time. You can actually go on our Penn Graduate Handbook to read about that, which pretty much states that in addition to the regular holidays, students should be given at least a minimum number of days off. Work-life balance is very, very important to us. Yesterday, I had a major project paper deadline for OSDI. So any one of you who work in systems will know about that. So me and my students were working like crazy on the paper. And then when it was all done, we were all happy, celebrate. And then he told me, Boone, next week I'm going to Hawaii with my girlfriend for 1 week. I said, great, please don't talk to me for the whole week. right? So I think this work-life balance is very important. I told him when he's in Hawaii, just look at the ocean and think about his future, right? So like don't think about research. And part of the thinking is you cannot be working all the time. Everybody needs to have time off to rest and recharge. And actually within the school, we have lots of social events too. There's TGIF every Friday. We have this organization called GSAC, which has individual departmental charters. And that basically, we provide funding for students to hold like a weekly Friday get-togethers. They socialize, and there's activities planned. I mentioned the culture day earlier. We had this lion dance, Indian dance, bring all cultures together. So for us, this work-life balance is very important. Um, so there's a student who says that applying to PhD with a master's degree, whether the coursework is different. So the first thing I want to stress upon everyone is that when you do a PhD, the bottleneck is not classwork. The classwork are there to help you build up your foundational knowledge so that you could work on your dissertation. So as a result, the predominantly a bottleneck time will be spent on getting your dissertation topic and working on your dissertation. So coursework is seldom the bottleneck, which is why I don't want students to overly think that. That said, if you come in with a master's degree, there are cases where you could transfer over some of the coursework, but I would say that's not a major bottleneck, so I don't think you should worry too much about that. And a lot of times the coursework helps you get to know other students. You have a more cohort experience if you're taking the same class with everyone. In a lot of cases, particularly after your first year, a lot of classes are actually seminar-based PhD seminar classes, which is more about paper reading. For example, when I teach a 700, 800 level seminar class, we'll have weekly paper readings, discuss research papers, and then work on your own research project at the end, which as a student, you have to do it anyway, right? So yeah, so coursework really isn't the big bottleneck here. Um, so there's a question about providing insight on the community at Penn statement and what they're looking for. So this actually is a great question. It ties in with our work-life balance. We want students who are well-rounded, who don't sit in the lab 24/7 and do their own work and be like ignorant about what other students are doing. So for example, like right after this meeting, I have my lab distributed systems lab seminar, and we want all our students to attend. Um, and I also greatly value as associate dean our various student groups, right? So I regularly meet our dean's doctoral advisory board, which comprises of student representatives from different graduate groups, and also our dean's doctoral diversity board. The GSAC president and members of the two boards, they actually attend our graduate group meeting, which is chaired by me. So they get a seat on the table to give us feedback on student life, discuss with the graduate groups on what we can do to make the experience for our students better. So I think when you answer the community at Penn question, try to think more about we rather than I, right? So when you write the statement, it's about what I will do, why I want to do a PhD. But the community should be more about the we. What have you done previously that show that you contributed to your community? Are there particular outreach programs that you're interested in? When you become a student here, of course, your priority should be towards your studies. That's number one, first and foremost. But are there maybe some other activities you would like to participate? Perhaps being a member of the Dean's Doctoral Board is something you're interested, and we would always welcome students interested in kind of activities that support other students. Cool. So How important it is to have publications in the application? I would say don't worry too much about it. Why? Because as I mentioned earlier, in many different research areas, the time scale of publication is different. In some field, you can publish with an abstract or a poster. In some areas, like the OSDI that I mentioned earlier, that's a few student effort building a big system that takes a really long time to evaluate. And if you get down to hardware projects, that's the time scale is even longer, right? I had a FPGA project with Professor Andre De Horn from ESE. It took us a few years to publish that paper, right? So I would say it's more important to show research interest slash trajectory. So if you have participated in any research activities as a student and you have made tangible contributions to the research, make sure you write about that and make sure your letter writer reflects that as well. There is no paper count. We are not counting the number of papers. And so if you don't have, don't worry too much about it. Um, so there's a question about when admissions decisions will be released. I think this is quite specific to the departments, but early spring onwards on a regular basis, we will be releasing decision. But please don't panic if you don't hear from us, right? Because different faculty work at different scale. Some of them may be triaging applicants, waiting for funding to come in and so on. So like, it's really till April 15, right? It's not over till it's over, right? So you should like just be patient and wait. So if you reach out to a professor by email, he encourages you to apply. Is that an indication that you might be accepted? It's really too early to tell. I think a lot of times a faculty may be polite. There's also cases where he or she show very strong, genuine interest about your application. But remember, your application is not evaluated in silo, right? It's evaluated with respect to a pool of applicants that are received. And between now and December 15, there could be many applications that come in. So I would say don't read too much into that. It's a positive thing. Certainly put your application in. But just keep in mind there's a whole selection process that comes after it. Hey, Christina, how much time do I have? I want to make sure I'm conscious. Well, almost on the hour.
Yes, we have 8 minutes left, so we should be moving on to the final section.
Sure. So I will hand this off to you. But let me end by just talking about one thing. As I know this is a really stressful period for everyone applying for PhD application. So I just want to end by sharing a little Boon personal story. So last December, I was back in Singapore. Actually, my for something that wasn't too good. So my mom just passed away on Christmas Day, actually. So but as I was going through some of her materials, I came across a box that she left behind. And in that box was a lot of my school material. But somewhere deep inside, I found that she kept a printed copy of my statement of purpose that I wrote for my PhD application 20 plus years ago. So reading that certainly brought a lot of tears to my eyes, but it was also quite interesting seeing how a younger version of myself talked to myself like 20 plus years later. So the reason why I want to share this story with you is I hope all of you will enjoy the process of applying. I certainly hope to see you here at Penn, but regardless, this is a really educational, enriching experience. And I certainly wish everybody all the best, and do keep your statement around. And this time with modern technology, you could even have it somewhere on Dropbox, Google Drive, or whatever you use. So maybe you can read it 20 years from now. So with that, I'm going to hand it off back to Christina.
All right. Thank you for your great questions. I hope you feel prepared to submit your applications. Remember, the deadline is December 15th. Let's review the application requirements, timeline, and best practices, as many of your questions related to those things. All right. So, I will first refer you to our graduate admissions website. Many of the questions you posed can be answered by perusing this website. So, I've provided the link at the top. If you want to take a screenshot of that for future reference, you may do so. However, please note that this session is being recorded. The recording will be available on our Penn Engineering Graduate Admissions YouTube channel very shortly. All right, so application requirements, I'm sure you all have reviewed these by this time, but we do have an online application form available through Apply Web. The link to that Apply Web application is also available on our graduate admissions website. You are required to upload a resume or CV. I know many of you asked questions about that. We do require a personal statement of no more than 2 pages. You are required to upload 2 letters of recommendation. However, if you are applying to the Computer and Information Ph.D. program, Computer and Information Science, you can also upload 3 letters of recommendation. We require your undergraduate transcript. Of course, this would be unofficial if you are still completing requirements for your undergraduate degree. Now, in terms of relevant scores, the GRE scores are optional, so you can choose whether or not you would like to upload those. I generally instruct people that if you received a quantitative score that you feel is very representative of your ability and you think that that could augment your profile, then please upload the GRE score. Otherwise, it's not required. If you are earning your undergraduate degree from a school where the medium of instruction is not English, you are required to provide language proficiency scores. All right, I'm going to try to move pretty quickly so that we can end at on time at 1 p.m. However, if we miss any of your questions, you can feel free to email the enrollment specialist. I'll provide their contact information shortly. Just as a review, your PhD application is due by December 15. The application will close on December 16. Now, there were a lot of questions about when you will receive a decision. Please note that that timeline may vary depending on your program of interest. However, everyone will receive an application decision before or by April 1st. Please also note that once you receive that decision, you are required to let us know by completing the enrollment form whether or not you accept the offer of admission. Finally, I like to review some best practices for applying. It is imperative that you research your program of interest. You want to be sure that the program offers the research areas that are of interest to you, or that there are faculty who can guide you in executing that research. Also, review and research prospective PIs. I know many of you have already done so because some people are thinking about identifying up to 5 faculty. We encourage you to maybe narrow it down to about 2 to maybe maximum 4 faculty who you like to consider for your program. However, it's important to know that whether or not you include those faculty's names on your application, we do have a review committee that will forward your application on to other faculty if their interests align with yours. So make sure you share materials with recommenders. I know you've already identified and probably have confirmed who your letter writers are going to be, but it's also helpful to provide them with your resume or CV as well as your personal statement so that can help guide their letter on your behalf. Identify 2 application readers. Oftentimes people will upload materials that have a different school's name. Like for example, they can say, hey, I love Penn State and I'm really interested in being considered. You want to make sure you're having someone review that information to be sure that you are indicating the University of Pennsylvania, for example, and that there aren't any other mistakes listed. Get connected. This was a big question asked in the chat. You are strongly encouraged to reach out to faculty, especially those who you are identifying as prospective PIs. You can also reach out to your program's PhD administrator. Those are the staff within the department who will be your primary contact once you matriculate into your program. Again, I'd like to encourage you to complete the enrollment form by April 15th. The enrollment form is your means of officially letting us know that you accept the offer of admission. You should receive a decision by April 1st, so you have until April 15 to complete the enrollment form. Before we head out, I just wanted to make sure you had the contact information of the relevant enrollment specialist for your PhD program of interest. I've also provided my contact information if you have further questions as a follow-up to this webinar. So I will encourage you to take a screenshot now if you like. However, as I noted before, this recording will be available and posted to our Penn Engineering Graduate Admissions YouTube channel. All right, so I'll hand it back over to Dr. Liu to provide closing remarks.
Sure. Thank you, Christina. So I see that we are on the hour. I also noticed there's a lot of questions that I hope we have time to answer, but unfortunately we don't. But I certainly could feel the enthusiasm and excitement. I would very much look forward to see all your applications. Every application is precious to us, and we will certainly hope to be lucky enough to recruit some of you to Penn. But one way or the other, I wish everybody all the best in this application cycle, and all of you end up in your dream school. All right, so with that, thank you all. Please take care.